All right, wonderful. I think that was a great segue into some of the things that Saro is going to be talking about right now on DAOs and blockchain games. So without further ado, let's welcome Saro to the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Hi. Yeah, great. In Alien Worlds, we've begun to implement some DAO-governed AI systems, which I actually will not be covering in detail here, but it's so interesting, that intersection, especially of decentralization and AI, and whether communities can effectively govern any of these systems collectively. Right now, those touch points are pretty difficult, but it would certainly help with some of those topics of decentralization that were just discussed if those touch points could become a little bit better in the future. Okay, so Alien Worlds is what I'm talking about today. So we were a homegrown project right here in Zug. I'll take you through a little bit of our timeline later, but we're the largest blockchain gaming project that was created right here in Zug, based just down the road. And in fact, Alex Denzler is on our board, so thank you to this ecosystem for having helped us to start. We're one of the largest dapps in the world. We were the first dapp to exceed numerous scale thresholds: 100,000 users, 200,000 users, 500,000 users, 1 million users. And we became really the proof point for how large and how scaled a dapp could be before sort of others had reached those thresholds. And that was really part, I think, of seeing the proof point that gaming was within blockchain for the story of utility, why people would open a blockchain wallet in the first place. Was it just to hold Bitcoin or to hold any other token, or could you actually do things with this technology? Okay, so in the Alien Worlds gaming metaverse, you use NFTs, utility NFTs, to mine on various planets, and each planet is a DAO, an on-chain DAO. So you use NFTs like a shovel or a digger, and then you choose which terrain you want to mine on, located on these different planets, which are DAOs, and you earn the fungible token, Trillium, in doing that. And then you use that fungible token to stake into those DAOs to gain governance control. And so those DAOs become teams within the game that are competing against each other. So the route in is mining using utility NFTs, but then you earn the token and then you stake that back into governance. And essentially the teams are competing for dominance within the metaverse. And this is all happening on chain. Okay, so I think it's a little bit interesting for people to hear about how that idea actually came about, because it was not a direct pathway. In 2017, we began early formation of ideas around what we called DACs at the time. And the initial concept actually was to be a block producer or a miner on a few different chains, and that the block production rewards would go into an account that was governed by DAO permissions, so that it could become a way to fund what a community might want to do. So there would be block production or mining activities going on, but those rewards were then used by the community and governed by a DAO. And that was indeed what we did. We were a block producer on a few different chains. And we had created this really robust DAO technology in order to govern that DAO. And we knew that it was scalable, it had lots of applications. And we got to about 7 different communities using our code base. But that wasn't going to pay the bills, right? We were, in fact, largely letting them do it for free. I mean, we might charge them a little bit, but so we needed a use case for this DAO technology, which we knew was scalable, robust, was really interesting. People loved interacting, within these blockchain projects as DAOs. And so we decided, let's put this inside of a game, and let's combine NFTs, a tokenomic structure, and that's what ended up happening, and Alien Worlds became a viral hit in 2020 and 2021. Okay, so just a few stats. About $10 million worth of Trillium is traded on global exchanges every day. There's between 50 and actually 100 custodians every week within Alien Worlds, so you could run to be a custodian at any time at play.alienworlds.io. Our NFT collection is actually the most owned NFT collection in the world. So more people own an Alien Worlds NFT than any other kind of NFT. Okay. And our mining game smart contract is one of the most, at the time of writing, it was the most called smart contract in the world. I think there's a couple that are at various times higher in the league tables, but one of the most called smart contracts in the world, and has been since 2021. So we're going to play this one.
Alien Worlds is the most popular Web3 metaverse, with over 240,000 unique active wallets connecting daily. Within the metaverse, its most solicited smart contract action, mining, gets called up to 13 million times a day, making it the most frequently executed action of any smart contract or any blockchain in the world.
So that was true about 6 months ago. I think it might be the case that there's some more scaled dApps now running, and that's one of the things that happens is the tech keeps getting better, and then more and more transactional volumes are going through these systems all the time. So let's ask the question then. So we've got, within Alien Worlds, we've got these DAOs that are competing as teams, but that's a very novel implementation of DAOs. In general, DAOs are ways of managing a treasury. And there's a few different reasons why projects are managing a treasury. And they are that as well in Alien Worlds, but they have this added component to being teams that are competing against each other. But so what are DAOs used for in blockchain? Let's have a show of hands. How many of you are a member of a DAO or have voted within a DAO? Okay, a few, less than half. Okay, so it's a super powerful thing to be able to collectively manage a treasury, right? And to manage it in a trustless way, where it's definitely the case that a requisite number of votes would be required before tokens would be sent out of that treasury. In general, within crypto, DAOs were successful. There was a period of time when there were a lot of DAOs around special ideas or special reasons why the DAO came about. So some of you might be familiar with Constitution DAO, which was a big DAO that was set up and got a huge amount of money into it to buy the first copy of the United States Constitution. Now we have a lot of DAOs that are forming around projects to govern token supply, and essentially as part of the decentralization story of many projects that are trying over time to cede control to their community. And so in those cases, the DAOs are helping to govern the direction of the project. But fundamentally what a DAO is it's just a blockchain account that people stake tokens into, and that gives them voting power. That voting power could just directly be for resolutions. So a resolution might come before the voters of a DAO that says, let's transfer X number of tokens from the treasury to this blockchain account because they say they're going to buy a copy of the Constitution for us, or they say they're going to create a website for us. So it could be simple like that, where it's like almost like a referendum, where on each resolution you have to cast your vote. Or it could be like in our case, where it's delegated. So in our case, what happens is voters vote for a group of custodians, and then those custodians have permissions that are ascribed to them, and it takes a majority of those custodians to be able to vote in favor of it. In every case, the way that the voting works is through stake-weighted voting. So if I have 50 tokens and you have 100 tokens, you have twice the voting power that I do. So it's not like in normal democratic systems where it's one person, one vote. And the reason why it has to be like that is because it's very easy in blockchain systems, unless they're KYC'd, to just split up your tokens amongst numerous accounts, right? So it doesn't make sense to have a concept of one account, one vote, because you could just split up your accounts into 10,000 accounts, and then you'd suddenly have 10,000 votes. So we have to have stake-weighted voting, but that in itself creates some issues that I'm going to come on to. So this is how it works in Alien Worlds. Members stake their tokens. They vote for candidates. 5 of them are elected on each DAO every week. And then those 5 custodians themselves then have programmatic permissions on the DAO's account. So it takes 3 out of 5 custodians to pass a resolution. And then once those 3 out of 5 custodians vote in favor of something, the funds go out. It's programmatic, right? There's no way of stopping it or getting it back. That's just, once those 3 out of 5 custodians vote, that's it. Okay, and this is an example of what one of our DAOs is voting for at any given time. So it's all happening on chain, and the resolutions are going in front of the DAO, and then the DAO is voting. The DAO custodians are voting in favor or against. this is a community-created website that's showing the actual, so this is making it a little bit easier to understand what those resolutions are. So the community created that so that they could understand what was going on, because we hadn't gotten around to it yet. And so here you can see there's a custodian allowance being considered, IKEY supporting the IPF, and so on. So these types of resolutions will come before the DAO, and then they vote in favor or against. These are our tokenomic flows. So this is how inflationary Trillium, in our case, flows throughout the metaverse. And I think what's interesting to see is inflation is generated every day, and then it directly flows to those 6 planet DAOs. Yeah, so essentially they're getting play-to-earn rewards as a DAO, and that's what's seeding their treasury or funding their treasury, and then the DAO custodians vote on how to spend that treasury. In other cases, like with Constitution DAO or other special purpose DAOs, there had to be a fundraising event to get the tokens into the treasury in the first place, whereas in our case, they're being funded out of inflation. Okay, so DAOs are super interesting, right? If we want to think of them slightly more conceptually, we would think that fungible tokens are ways of representing aggregate value, right? I can have 100,000 tokens, or I can have one. NFTs are ways of representing unique items, right? So I could have a particular piece of art. I might be able to represent the value of a car on chain. In our case, I might have a shovel or a piece of land. Those are all NFTs, so unique items or series of unique items. DAOs are ways of representing a group of people on chain, which I would say of all of those 3 concepts might even be the most interesting, right? If you didn't know otherwise which one has been most impactful, that's a very impactful concept, that you can represent a group of people and their collective intention, their collective decision-making on chain. And also that group of people can come and go, because you can just sell your DAO tokens if you want to get out of the DAO, and you can buy some DAO tokens if you want to come in. So it's a very fluid structure. But we're discovering that there are real benefits to this. I mean, for starters, the massive scale that we were able to achieve was in part because we had this community of people all making decisions and going off and doing their own marketing and promotion, and highly evangelized within the system. So there's numerous benefits to DAOs, and there are also some challenges. And so we've been building them since 2018, and we have some learnings now about how do human beings kind of respond within these systems, and what are some of the pain points and some of the benefits. Okay, so one of the issues in a stake-weighted voting system is that you have to have engaged voters. So you can have a massive treasury, billions of dollars sometimes even, and amazingly within these systems, sometimes you have very small numbers of people voting. The token distribution is what defines the voting distribution, right? So because each token is a single voting unit, the token distribution is what defines the voting. If you ended up having 5 whales with 50% or 60% of the total token distribution, and if those 5 whales just happen not to care about your project anymore, they could be millionaires in various parts of the world who went in and bought tokens of different projects. 6 months, 9 months later, they don't even really realize that they have your token anymore. Especially interestingly, if the DAO's token has gone down in value, and if all they ever thought of it as was a speculative instrument. Now those are just some tokens sitting in a wallet, and they don't really care. But within the context of your system and whatever that DAO is trying to do, that's really significant. That community really needs those people to vote. Because otherwise what's happening is you're getting these tiny percentage of the electorate voting, and sometimes you can't actually reach the minimum level that's required to pass a resolution, or sometimes what happens is just a small handful of well-organized people can get together and almost drain the coffers of the DAO, right? So if you don't have a sort of minimum level of people voting all the time, what you end up with is a very vulnerable DAO, sometimes which has a lot of resources within it. This goes along with the fact that, in general, these are anonymous systems. So there's very little accountability. And in fact, you don't even necessarily know how to contact the people. You could have whales in your system who aren't voting. You don't know how to get in touch with them. There have been cases that we could come on to if there's time of DAOs in which founders have actually ended up taking large quantities of the tokens, and this was only later discovered. This type of thing happens in anonymous systems. There's also some issues around how do these DAOs eventually become self-sufficient or sort of self-perpetuating in the long term. It could be the case if they were a single-purpose DAO like Constitution DAO. Once they buy a copy of the Constitution, that's it. They don't have a purpose anymore. But in most cases, there's some concept of there needing to be a long-term purpose for the DAO. So if it's a DAO that governs a particular project, that needs to have ongoing activity within it. Unfortunately, what happens in many cases is that there's an initial burst of enthusiasm, especially when the token price is high, but in the long run, you get under sort of involvement or interest in the DAO. The other thing that can happen is that oftentimes DAOs are a way to give power to the community. But if the community is not yet able to self-organize, if they actually are still quite reliant on the founding project's team, then again, you get sort of an underability for people to really self-organize and be effective, and they kind of still expect the founding team to have a role, when in fact, sometimes the whole purpose of the DAO is so that the community can gradually take over. Okay. So here's some examples of some DAOs in the world and what's happened. I think one that I'll just close on, one sort of interesting example is Spice DAO, which was a DAO that got together to buy Dune. What they thought they were doing was buying Dune. And unfortunately, it turned out that all they did was buy a copy of Dune, a copy of the book. They thought that, so this is the sci-fi franchise Dune, right? These people got together, they raised a bunch of money, and they thought that they were buying the IP. And it turned out they were just buying a copy of the book. So this is the type of thing that is so common unfortunately, in decentralized systems, right? Is because you've got, let's think through how that happened. You had maybe 50 people all around the world coordinating to make this purchase. They would have had to nominate a company to do it on their behalf, because DAOs can't actually contract, right? The DAO can't sign one side of a contract because it's just a decentralized entity. So they would have contracted a company to help them do it. There would have been some miscommunication. This type of thing is happening all the time, right? Where it's very difficult for disparate groups of people all over the world to self-organize and sort of nail the delivery every time. And I think especially since, the overlay to almost everything in crypto is asset price volatility, right? So that what in general will have happened is that people piled in when prices were going up, and then when they start to come down or level off, a lot of times people have lost interest, and you only get a few people left over who maybe just don't have the skills or aren't that interested to actually execute effectively. But you might actually have quite sizable systems underneath that, big treasuries of hundreds of thousands, millions, or sometimes, even billions of dollars within these DAOs. So that's a little bit of the sort of learnings that we've discovered over the years. But what I would like to come back to is this. So these are the blockchain transactions running through this DAO. This is still valuable. It's still super valuable to have a piece of technology that allows people to programmatically govern a blockchain treasury. That is fundamentally something that adds value to the system. And so if we think of DAO tokens as one of the next iterations in the lineage of fungible tokens, NFTs, and DAO tokens, DAOs have intrinsic value. There's a use case for them. I think what we're discovering is that DAOs are people, and when that is also overlaid with asset price volatility, it's very difficult to get that group of people to effectively coordinate towards a common purpose. But I don't think that that's the end of the story. That just means that we're part of the way through the story. It means that we're still evolving. I think it does, introduce a bit of a note of caution when you see a DAO, is that the type of thing that could have longevity? What's its purpose? What's its legacy plan? But fundamentally, we're still looking at a piece of technology that has huge value, but we're sort of dealing with some human friction in the meantime, especially since crypto is so volatile. Thanks. I think I'm at time. Should I take a question? Any questions? Yeah? Yeah, so in fact, our company, Dacoco, we first founded the company in order to be the legal wrapper for that block producer DAC that I mentioned. So sometimes a company can form. There are jurisdictions where DAOs are, as a native entity, being recognized like a company. Basically, what you have to do is appoint a company to act for the DAO. But there's a lot of friction in that because the DAO is like if there's a custodian board that changes, for example, every week, it's a different entity every single week. So there's no easy answer to the question of how do you create a legal entity that reflects the DAO without there being quite a bit of liability on all sides. The other thing to mention is that there's a lot of liability issues for people involved in DAOs. In general, there's joint and several liability for them, which is kind of what you don't want. So, yeah. Oh, Alex, yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point. The resolutions being easy to understand is a huge part of the story. But even when they are, we don't necessarily see, a massive change in behavior. Because I think the communities do figure out in general what the resolution is that they're being asked to opine on. But yeah, you need user interfaces that make it very clear what you're voting on. And also, I think one of the functions of a central team, whilst there is one, is to sort of like be the purveyor of news, like to say, okay, here are the resolutions on this DAO this week that you might want to pay attention to. Yeah, there's lots of sort of utilities that can be provided to the community. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.